Hello and welcome to a new video. Today we are going to continue the discussion of the basics of the C language. So we will introduce a new data type that we haven't seen in Python. What we have here is a data type for character. So this is again the declaration step. Remember, you have to declare the data type of the variable. And at the same time, this is the initialization step. So you can have declaration and initialization in the same line. So to see this, remember the example from last video as we have double miles. And we said this is the declaration step and this is the initialization step, right? You can combine these two steps in one line by simply writing double miles equal 2. Okay, so this is basically will do two jobs in one line. Okay, so again, we are declaring a variable letter of type character, and we are storing the character A, small a, inside that variable. So how do I print a character variable? I need a placeholder for this. And the placeholder for character is C. So we've seen LF for double, C is for character, and just like in Python, D is for integer. All right. So when I print the character, you will see just what you expect, the character A. Now, what will happen if I print the variable letter using the placeholder for integer using D? Now, in this case, you will get this number. Now, let me add a new line just to make this clear. As a character, this is A. As integer, this is 97. Now, you might think, what is 97? If you remember, when we discussed Unicode in Python, this is what we call the Ascii code. It's basically a subset of the Unicode. This is just a number representation of the character small a. Remember, we said each character has a number representation associated with it. So the number associated with small a in the ASCII system is 97. Okay. So let's comment out this and see what else we have. The next part we will discuss here is the following. Remember, we said you can use, or you need to use LF as a placeholder for double variable. What will happen if you use F? Let's see. So I will run this program. I have the same output. So what we have here is the following. In printf, you can use F or LF for double variable. However, in scanf, you need to use LF for double. Okay, you might think why this is the case. You can read about basically the characteristic of the printf function that allows you to use F or LF, where in the scanf you cannot do this. So basically, with double variables in printf, you have the freedom to use F or LF. I will recommend to use LF for any double variable in any function, basically. So LF is again short for long float, and you need this for any double variable. What is the next part we have? You have integer x, and you are storing 5.2 in that variable. Again, this is just to show you how to use the placeholder for integer. But in this case, we have a real number, right? So 5.2 is not an integer, and you are storing 5.2 in an integer variable. So if you run this, what do you think is the case? You will have 5. What we have here is basically truncating. You are basically losing the decimal part of the number. You are using the fraction of the number. By the way, this is not rounding. So even if you have 5.7, you will still just print 5. So what we have here, if you store a real number in an integer variable, you will use the fractional part. Okay. What else? Next, we have a double variable y, and we are storing 5 divided by 2 in this variable. Now, what do you think will be the output here? When you run, you see that the output is just 2.0. Why this is the case? In C, if you divide integer by integer, the result will be integer. Okay, so 5 as integer over 2 as integer will give you just the number 2. However, why do we see 2.0 in this case? Because when we have 2 as a result, you store it inside the variable y, and y is of type double. Okay, so how do you store 2 as integer in a variable of type double? You basically make it a real number by adding the 0.0. So again, when you divide integer by integer, you will get integer. So how can I get the real result of 5 by 2? How can I get the correct result of dividing 5 by 2? You will basically have to have at least one double number in the operation. So either 5.0 over 2 or 5 divided by 2.0. Either one of these will give you 2.5. So if you have double divided by integer, or integer divided by double, or double divided by double, in all these cases, the result is double. Okay, so let's see the next example. In this case, we have 5.0 over 2, so double over integer. However, you store the result in an integer variable. Okay, so 5.0 over 2 will give you 2.5. But when you store this in an integer, you will lose basically the fractional part. You will end up with just 2, as you can see in the output below. By the way, any time you see operation or an expression with different data type, this is what we call mixed type expression. Basically, an expression with more than one data type. Okay, let's see what do we have next. This time you have integer total as 10 and integer count as 3. This is just two integer variables. Then you have a double variable average. What we need to do is we need to calculate the average by dividing total over count. However, total and count are both integer. So if you divide total over count, 10 over 3, you will just get 3. You store it in double, you get 3.0. So you can see that we did not get the correct result that we want. We need 3.3 as an average. So you can either convert these to double, one of these variables to double, and for example here, convert this to a double variable, then do the division. Or if you want to keep these as integer, what can you do? You can perform the following operation. So we agree total is integer, also count is integer. I want to convert total to double. So before the variable, I will come and write parentheses, and here I will write double. Basically, I am casting or converting total from integer to double. This is type casting. This is what we call type casting, which is converting from one data type to another. Okay. By the way, casting does not change the data type of the variable. So if I copy this, paste it down here, and remove the casting step. Okay, so let's write this as average 2. And let's copy the print statement and paste it here and print average 2. Since I am using average 2, I have to declare it. So I will simply write a comma here and write avg 2. By the way, you can declare more than one variable in one line, in one statement like this. You just separate them by a comma. So when I run this, what you get average 3.3. However, average 2 is just 3.0. What I want to say from this example is total, even though we casted total to double in the previous statement, this does not affect or change the data type of the variable itself. So the casting step only affect the statement itself. Only basically the step where you are casting is affected by the operation. Any further step is not basically affected. So total is still integer in this case. Okay. So you can basically cast total or cast count or both of them. All of this will give you the same result. Okay, next we have this operation. This is just similar to Python. This is the modulo operation, which give you the remainder. What you have here is 5 modulo 2, which is, as we know, is just 1. All right. This is also similar to Python. We are adding 1 plus 2.0. When you have addition of integer plus double, the result will be just double. So you get 3.0. All right. What do we have next? This is the last example. You have a combination of plus and multiplication. What do we get here? The precedence rules are the same as in Python. So you multiply first. This is negative 3 by 5 is negative 15. Minus 2 is negative 17. Okay, so that's it for the examples we have. Before we finish this video, I would like to clarify the preprocessor directive we talked about last video. So we said this statement here, the include statement, we have it because we need to use printf in our code, right? We said this is similar to the import statement in Python with some differences. So we are going to discuss what does include actually does, or what does include actually do. So when you write Ascii code, so this is your source file or source code, at the end, you would like to execute the code, right? You would like to run the code. Before this, your code has to go over multiple steps. So you know the compiler, okay? We talked about the compiler, which is the program that will convert your C code to basically binary code or the machine language. So the compiler is another program that will make your code executable or give you executable code. Before the compiler, there is one additional program that we call the preprocessor. So the preprocessor is just a program that takes your C program. It will look at the directive, like include or define. Remember define from last video where we use it to define constants. So the preprocessor is a program that will look for directives and it will modify your C code. So your actual C code will be modified by the preprocessor program according to the preprocessor directive. So what does this modification look like? For example, when you have include statement in your code, the preprocessor will go to the header file like stdio.h it will copy something from this file, it will paste it to your C code. Okay, so it will actually modify the text of the C file. What else? When you have a define statement, so when you have define like this, for example, capital A equal 1.2, the preprocessor will go to your code. It will search for any time you have A, for example, assume you have this expression, int x equal to capital A by 4. So the preprocessor will look for capital A in your code, and it will replace it with 1.2. So after the preprocessor finish with your C code, your C code will look like this. So it will replace the constant with the actual value. So again, the preprocessor is going to modify your C code by looking at the preprocessor directives and modifying the code according to those directives. And this is one difference between include and import in Python. Importing in Python does not modify the actual Python code, does not modify the text of the code. However, include, or basically the preprocessor, will modify the text of the code according to the preprocessor directives like include. So that's it for this video, and I will see you on the next one.